The Wheel of Chaos is here. I am so excited to try this concept. This is an idea that I got from Bengal, who's been doing something similar on his channel on YouTube for a while. But I am super excited. As you can see here with our wheel in front of us, I have 30 potential options that are going to completely control how we go through and do this first round of the 2026 NFL mock draft. I am super excited to see how weird this thing's going to get. We're going to explore a bunch of different ideas and concepts and just have some fun picking random things that'll go into this mock draft right here. If you actually want to see a real mock draft where I put in like my own personal opinions, it's already posted on my YouTube channel. I posted it about a week ago. So by all means, go and check that out. But without further ado, let's just have a little bit of fun here as we lead up to the draft. And let's see what type of things will happen here. And with the first wheel spin, we get to take a quarterback. So things get to stay pretty normal for now. So what we're going to do is stick and pick. And we're going to give the Las Vegas Raiders Fernando Mendoza. We're playing it safe so far, so I'm glad to see that. But we go up to number 2 with the Jets, who could really go a lot of different directions. I think right now the consensus would be either Arvell Reese or even recently a lot of conversations about David Bailey. But, of course, the wheel is controlling everything. We got to choose a player that has a 40 time that is slower than 5. So what we can do is when we click on these players, we can go to testing and comp and just scroll down. So as you can see, David Bailey ran a 4.5. So he is too fast for this metric. So what I'm thinking is, can we go Maui Goa? So he didn't run a 40. Okay, so things are going to get weird now. Did Ruben Bain run? We got to go test around. All right. Monroe Freeling. Come on, Monroe Freeling. 4.93. Are you kidding me? So since he didn't run, this is going to be an asterisk that I'll put on these ones, as there's a couple combine-based ones. If they did not run, then I'm going to treat that as an open opportunity to draft that player. So since Francis Mauigoa didn't run, we don't know what his 40 time would be. We can take him. That's a safe play. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the Jets go offensive line and take Francis Mauigoa, offensive tackle, out of Miami, which is still a weird pick because I think a lot of them are expecting it to be a defensive pick, an edge rusher, which it most likely will be. But let's get a little weird here. Let's say they go offensive line. Let's get some protection. It's always a safe pick going to the offensive line. And we get to Arizona now at number 3. And we have to go with a slightly bad pick. So it's not horrifically bad, but it's got to be a bad pick that really doesn't align with what they're trying to do or their future. So Arizona is in a really interesting spot here. So I think anything on the defensive line would be seen as a good pick, whether it's an edge rusher, whether it's like one of these wide receivers. So it's tough to figure out what would be like a slightly bad pick. I guess what a slightly bad pick would be in this situation is taking a player at a position when there's arguably better players of value at that spot at 3. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to say that Arizona takes Caleb Downs, safety out of Ohio State, at the 3. Because you could obviously make the argument that, 1, safety is a very unsexy position to be taking in the draft. It's not as highly sought after or highly valued. And then on top of that, there's more positional value and arguably better players available on the board. So for them, I think you could look at Arvell Reese. You could look at David Bailey. I've seen a lot of people say Jeremiah Love here. So while Caleb Downs is an unbelievable player, I think this can be seen as a slightly bad pick, especially considering they signed safeties in free agency this past year. But unbelievably talented player and can certainly help out that defense, playing alongside Will Johnson, who they got in the second round, who I think was great this past year. And now we get to number 4. So what is this? The Tennessee Titans have to take a player that's shorter than 6'1". There's a guy. He's pretty talented. He ran a 4.3 40-yard dash. Even though it's not his position group, he went out and tested with the wide receivers. He's 6 foot. He's a running back out of Notre Dame. He's an absolute athletic freak. Give me Jeremiah Love, running back out of Notre Dame. That is an amazing fit in Tennessee. Let's get some resources to help out Cam Ward. You can make the argument that offensive line would certainly help in this position, or even getting more defense, but I think he's too talented to not pass up. So go get yourself a great running back in Jeremiah Love. So now let's see what the Giants end up doing. So the Giants are also going to take a slightly bad pick. Interesting. Let's get weird here. So the Giants, there's a couple things that people have been expecting with the Giants. I've seen some people say one of these wide receivers, either Carnell Tate, Mekhi Lemon, or Jordan Tyson, whoever their favorite is. Most commonly, I see Carnell Tate. I also see Sonny Styles as a guy that is picked there, even though he's an off-ball linebacker, which isn't as heavily valued. He's just too athletic and very talented to be taken at this spot. And then also just because of how much depth that they have across that defensive line, I think that you could see edge as a bad pick to make. You can make the argument that, just getting edge rushers isn't a bad thing, especially when Kayvon Thibodeau has been in trade rumors for years now. And now you have Dexter Lawrence, who has obviously requested a trade from the Giants. So there's a lot of turmoil on what that front seven is going to be. But what I'm going to do, oh man, this is tough. This is actually very tough. What I'm going to say they do is I'm going to have them go with, let's say, Mekhi Lemon, the wide receiver out of USC. I think this is definitely a bad pick, especially considering the fact that Sonny Styles is on the board. I think Carnell Tate is a better wide receiver going into the league right now than Mekhi Lemon. I also think that Mekhi Lemon, the rumors that came out with him around the scouting combine was he had horrible combine interviews, and I don't think GMs forget those things. That being said, I think his skill set will be able to fill in for Wan'Dale Robinson, who they just lost to the Tennessee Titans, playing in that underneath role in the slot. So I think he fills a need while also being a slightly bad pick when there's, better players that you can go and get in this draft class at this spot and at that same position. We're getting so weird, dude. This is already crazy. So now we're up to number 6 now. Is this the Cleveland Browns? And we get a pretty normal one here. They're going to go wide receiver or running back. So in this hypothetical scenario, they saw Mekhi Lemon go to the Giants at 5, and now they're like, we need to go and get our wide receiver before he falls off the board. So this is where I have them going and grabbing Carnell Tate, wide receiver out of Ohio State. I think this is a very common draft spot for him. I could also see a world where Cleveland trades back and allows one of these teams to trade up and come and get one of these edge rushers that are falling in the draft and still get Carnell Tate a few spots later for a little bit cheaper. But this is a great pick for them. They just need to get younger and more talented on that offense. So I like that pick for them. Pretty normal, nonetheless. But let's give it a spin. Big money, big money. And now we're going to stick and pick. We're going to go with whatever the consensus is at number 7 now for the Washington Commanders, who really need to just get younger and more talented across their entire roster. They're one of the oldest teams in the NFL the past few years. So I'm going to have them go with just a guy who has huge upside potential, and he's falling on the board. I'm going to have them take Arvell Reese, edge, but can also be considered off-ball linebacker out of Ohio State. He has this amazing mix of athleticism, position of need, and then just skill set altogether. You can put him all over the field. You can have him as a designated edge pass rusher. You can have him as an off-ball linebacker. You can use him in so many different types of formations and personnel groupings that he just fits so well with what they need. So I think that would be the consensus pick in this situation. Which brings us to a really interestingly built team at number 8 with the New Orleans Saints and Kellen Moore and his team over there. And we're going to turn to ChatGPT to give us some sagely wisdom on how to pick at number 8 right here. So I have a pre-typed out script right here. So I'm going to have them name a specific player the Saints should pick at number 8. in the first round of the 2026 NFL Draft. And they want the Saints to take Peter Woods, the defensive tackle out of Clemson. Are you kidding me? Okay, we are getting so weird. He's the 29th ranked prospect, and the Saints, they're going to go and get their guy, even though they have Brian Brzee, who all reports is that he's still going to be the guy over there, and they still are really high on him. They're going to go back to Clemson and get another interior defensive lineman in Peter Woods to continue to bolster that defensive line. That is a pretty big reach in my opinion, but the wheel is all-knowing, and the wheel is going to control what we do today. So what the wheel asks for, the wheel gets, and Peter Woods to the Saints. And a lot of really talented players are falling into Kansas City's lap here at 9, and they are going to take a player that has to be lighter than 200 pounds. And I think this is a pretty obvious pick. So unfortunately, some of these more talented edge rushers and linebackers are just a little bit too big. So I think Kansas City is not going to reinvent the wheel, and they're going to go and get the best corner in this draft, in my opinion, in Mansour Delane out of LSU. I think this fills a huge position of need. They lost like 3 defensive backs in free agency this past year. So I think this is, 1, a position of need, and 2, you could argue is their best player available. So pretty normal pick, and I think that's a great fit in Kansas City for Mansour Delane. Now we keep it moving, and now we got to take a 4 or a 5-star from high school. So we go back to this, and it's Cincinnati at number 10, who I think was really hoping Caleb Downs falls to them right here. But now I think they get a great opportunity to go and take one of these edge rushers that are here, whether it be David Bailey or Ruben Bain. And I think you could also consider them going and grabbing Sonny Styles, who is a 5-star right here. But I'm going to just have them go and take an edge rusher. They lost Trey Hendrickson, and they just need to get better there. I think Ruben Bain is a little bit older. So for that reason, I think they go David Bailey, the edge out of Texas Tech, who was a 4-star. So he meets the criteria, and what an amazing pick at 10 for Cincinnati, giving them exactly what they need. And it brings us to the Miami Dolphins, who have a lot of really good players here. Sonny Styles falling to them at 11 would be insane. But they have got to take someone that's shorter than 6'1". So unfortunately, Sonny Styles is going to plummet in this draft. Ruben Bain is falling like crazy. What is happening? What about all these offensive linemen? But what I'm going to have them do is they can't go Jordan Tyson either. Wow. All right, I'm going to have them go with a pick that I think is pretty normal for them. And I'm going to have them go and get a defensive back, get a corner. I think he's 6 foot. Yes, he is. And take Jermod McCoy, the corner out of Tennessee. Let's go Volunteers. He fits a position of need. You can make an argument that maybe this is a little bit high for him at 11, but with the fact that I think Dallas is in the market at cornerback too, Kansas City's in the market at a cornerback as well, that you could see people kind of go early on these defensive backs, and Miami certainly just needs to get more talent in the room. Just a little bit of injury-prone stuff because obviously he didn't play in the entire season last year, which brings us to, now we're taking a Big Ten player. So the Dallas Cowboys are going to be going over to the Big Ten, and I think they're going to be taking a player that fills a huge need for them, which is their defense, and they're going to go get the athletic freak in Sonny Styles, the linebacker out of Ohio State. What a great pick for the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, linebacker not being a premium position, but Sonny Styles being an amazing athlete who can, be a off-ball linebacker blitzing at the quarterback. He can drop back in pass coverage and match up against a bunch of different positions. And he can really help out in that run game, getting east and west very, very quickly with, I believe, what was it, a 4.3 40 that he ran? 4.46 at 6'4", 243. Oh, my gosh. Great pick for them. But let's go over to the Los Angeles Rams, and let's see what type of move they're going to make. And they're going with a player that's taller than 6'4". So there's a lot of different things that they can end up doing here. You could certainly look at wide receiver for them. And I think Jordan Tyson obviously would make a lot of sense. But doesn't meet our criteria, so we will not be giving them 6'2" Jordan Tyson. What I ended up doing in my own mock draft is I had the Rams going with an offensive lineman because I just felt like in the short term it gets Matthew Stafford, a guy with lingering back and spinal issues, some more protection to be able to progress his career along and compete right now for a Super Bowl, while also getting younger across that offensive line for whoever is going to come next after Matthew Stafford. So I'm going to continue with that, and I'm going to have them go Spencer Fano, offensive tackle out of Utah, who is 6'6", 308 pounds, and I think that is a great position of need for the Rams. So I like that pick for them. And wow, Ruben Bain falling in this draft. But let's keep it moving. Let's go to number 14. We've got the wonderful Baltimore Ravens, who had probably one of the craziest up and down off seasons this past year. And it's going to keep getting worse. They have to make a horrifically bad pick. So this is the other part that's like kind of open for interpretation for me. I have to kind of figure out what is just a horrifically bad pick for the Ravens here that still, like, I guess somewhat makes sense. Like, obviously I could just go and like grab a kicker and just say a kicker here, but I want to have some level of, I guess, realness to this, just make it a bad pick. So what I think I'm going to do here is just draft at a position they really don't need and also kind of reach towards it. So for them at 14, I think, you know what I'm going to do? You know what I'm going to do? We're going to get real weird, and I'm going to explain it too. We're going to have the Ravens take Jadarian Price, the running back out of Notre Dame. So I'm going to go, and the only way that, first off, it's a horrifically bad pick. I know that. The way I'm going to spin this and the way I'm going to like frame this to make it make sense is Jahmyr Gibbs coming out of the draft in his year a couple of years ago was projected to be a fringe first-round guy, most likely a second-round guy, and ended up going to the Lions at like 12. So Jadarian Price, if people are really high on him and really like his potential and the player that he is, then we're going to say that in that world, the Ravens go and get him to get a younger running back to add to that backfield with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. But because it's just not a position of value, it's at a position they already have a very talented running back at, and it's a reach, it's clearly just a horrifically bad pick. So the worst gets worser for the Rams here. So let's keep it going, and we'll go to Tampa Bay now at 15, who really had a down year with Baker Mayfield last year, and they're going to let me make a pick on this one. So I get carte blanche to make a decision here and choose what is the best option for them. What I did in my own mock draft is I had them reach a little bit and take C.J. Allen, the linebacker out of Georgia, just because with the Levante David retiring, I think that their linebacker depth and their linebackers they have on their roster just weren't that great. I know they recently signed Alex Anzalone over from the Detroit Lions to kind of fill in a need there. So maybe they like who they've brought in free agency. And normally I would say that would be the stick and pick. But just with how the board is falling right now, I think they can't pass up on Ruben Bain. Edge is such a position of need for them, and Ruben Bain is falling in this draft. A guy who some people at the beginning of the season last year were saying was going to be a potential number 1 overall pick. So to get him at 15 here is tremendous value. And if it was me as the GM picking, that would be my pick as well. So what a pick for Tampa Bay, and exactly what they need on that defense to kind of help out what they're doing over there. And now we're going to go wide receiver or running back to the Jets. And I think this makes a lot of sense. The Jets obviously need to get younger and need to get more talented. Earlier, we had them go offensive line with Francis Mauigoa. So now at 16, I think they should look at defense. And the fact that they haven't already is a little bit concerning, especially given they have Aaron Glenn, who's a defensive mind. But let's say they go all in on their offense, and I'm going to have them take Jordan Tyson, wide receiver out of Arizona State, who I think really fits in really well over there. I think Mekhi Lemon makes the most sense for them at 16 as just a guy who can fill in the underneath stuff. But Jordan Tyson is just very talented, and he's absolutely a great pick right there for the Jets. which moves to my Detroit Lions, picking at 17. And I love to see this. They're taking a player taller than 6'4". We are going to the offensive line. And when I look at kind of the roster and the depth chart that they built, they really made a lot of interesting, I guess, not very splashy moves in free agency. Obviously, signing Larry Borum in free agency. They signed Cade Mays, the center, in free agency to a multi-year deal. And I actually kind of like the direction they're going with their interior offensive line. I think Larry Borum is a guy I don't know much about and has never really had much experience being a full-time starter. So for me, I would rather get a depth guy, a younger guy that has potential that can slot into more of a true tackle role and kind of develop there and maybe put less pressure on Larry Borum to elevate into being a full-time guy if he really isn't. So I'm going to have them go Monroe Freeling, who is 6'7", 315 pounds, and has ideal measurables to translate over to a tackle, which I think not many offensive linemen in this draft class have. So the Lions are going to go and capitalize on that, which I think is a pretty normal pick for them, but a very great pick. And now we go to our rivals, the Minnesota Vikings at 18, and they got to take a slight reach. A slight reach. Okay. So normally what I have them do is I take Dylan Thieneman, the safety out of Oregon, who I think absolutely fills a need for them. But if that's kind of the norm pick and they got to take a slight reach in this draft, then I think what they end up doing, what are their needs here? They say safety, offensive line, corner, D tackle. Okay. So what I'm going to have them do is I'm going to have them go, no, that's not really enough of a reach in my opinion. How do we want to attack this? Let's do that. Let's have them go to a guy who I think is actually a sneaky riser in this draft. And given the fact there's a lot of other interior guys that are available that are more highly considered first-round guys, I'm going to say they go interior D-line, and I'm going to have them go Christian Miller, the defensive tackle out of Georgia, which is absolutely a reach given the fact that there is a lot more interior D-line available here on the board, and he is not really heavily mocked to go in the first round. I think Caleb Banks is another guy you could consider here, but I'm going to have them go Christian Miller, go from an SEC team out of Georgia, which is just one of the blue bloods, blue chip program. So a little bit of a reach, but that's what they're going to be sticking and picking. And they really have gone with a lot of veteran presences there. So getting younger there, someone who can develop, I think is a good fit for them. Which moves us to number 19, and they're going to go somewhere in the secondary at cornerback, strong safety, or free safety. I think they would prefer to go Kenyon Sadiq right here. I think that would be the ideal perfect fit. But for them, I think Dylan Thieneman has been falling in this draft. Safety is a position that they need. And I think it comes down to, what do you want more? Do you want more of a back-end, more coverage guy? Or do you want someone with a lot more box versatility in Emmanuel McNeil-Warren? And that's what I'm going to have them do. I'm going to get a little weird with this one. I'm going to have them take Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. And I think the reason is what you see with modern defenses now is the expansion of that hyper-versatile safety player that can kind of operate in that Nick Emanwari, Kyle Hamilton type of role where they can step up and serve almost like a linebacker as another person in run support in the box. They can be a big nickel matching up against, slot tight ends, bigger wide receivers, slot receivers, or they can pass rush after the quarterback. And I think that positional versatility is something a lot of modern defenses are chasing. And Emmanuel McNeil-Warren gives you exactly that. So while Thieneman is a great player, and I think would absolutely be in play here, I'm going to say they go for the athletic freak who is 6'2", 182, and has way more positional versatility. And now we're at, 20 now? Is this the Cowboys' other pick? And they have to go with someone who was a 3-star or lower coming out of high school. So they have to go with a guy who is not like a highly sought-after prospect. And so we could look at Dylan Thieneman here, going and getting a guy who could really fill a need on the defense there. But when you look at a lot of the guys that are up here on the board, there's not a lot of great options. A lot of them were pretty highly touted coming out of high school. Yeah. So I'm thinking Akeem Mesidor is there. Edge is definitely a need. Wow, even Omar Cooper Jr. Where's Caleb Lomu at? Another 4-star. I'm going to have them go with an edge rusher. I think Akeem Mesidor makes a lot of sense at 20. I think that's pretty good value. He's definitely on the older side of things. But I think Dallas is a team that wants to be competitive right away. They want to compete in that division, and they want to go and try and win a Super Bowl. I don't think their roster is quite there yet, but I think going for a more age pro-ready player like Akeem Mesidor at a position of need, being edge, ever since they traded away Micah Parsons, makes a lot of sense. So Dallas, they're going to go with edge, Akeem Mesidor out of Miami, which makes sense for them. It's fair. And now we're going to the D-line. We're going to go back to the D-line, and we're going to have the Pittsburgh Steelers, which I think this is a terrible pick because I think they have Cameron Hayward, who has been amazing. So I guess they're saying they want to get some depth there to develop underneath him, or they want to operate more out of a 4-3 type of scheme and have 2 defensive tackles, which is fair. And I guess they've got a couple of interesting options that are still here on the board. You got Caden McDonald here, with Peter Woods already flew off the board. And then farther down, you've got some other guys that are kind of risers like Caleb Banks that we talked about. But I'm going to have them stick and pick and go with right here, Caden McDonald, defensive tackle out of Ohio State. So now we're at the Chargers, and they really need O-line. They really need O-line. Let's see if the wheel gives it to them, grants them that privilege. Perchance, let's take a look at guys that are from non-Power 5 schools. Is there any that are a non-Power 5 team that are available right now? I don't think there is. I don't think there's a lot of options that are on the board here. So for them, I think the best option is Chris Johnson out of San Diego State. I think that might be the option here. A lot of SEC, a lot of Big 12, a lot of Big 10. Oh, man, this isn't looking good. UCF, if they want to go Malachi Lawrence. Oh, I'm going to have them go Chris Johnson, the corner out of San Diego State. I think you could certainly continue to get more defensive backs, especially in that division that has Patrick Mahomes, that has Bo Nix, who just and the Broncos, who just acquired Jalen Waddle, and the Raiders, obviously, who just drafted Fernando Mendoza in our mock draft here, #1 overall. You certainly want to get DBs that can help out in the passing game. And while this is certainly a reach, Chris Johnson is a very talented player, and I think they can maximize what he can do over there in Los Angeles. I don't know why I was about to say Las Vegas. But now we keep the wheel spinning, see what the wheel will grant. And I get decision-making power again. The wheel is treating the Eagles nicely. And I'm going to have fun with this one. I'm going to say Howie does what Howie does. And actually, you know what? No, I'm not going to do it. I was going to say that Howie goes and takes another linebacker out of Georgia, being C.J. Allen, who's pretty good value, I'd say, right here. I think this isn't a bad spot to be taking him. But just with how the board is falling, I think that they either go with a cornerback, like Avion Terrell out of Clemson, because cornerback 2 is a huge problem, whether it was Darius Slay or whether it was Adoree Jackson. They were really exposed there. But I think I'm going to have them go interior O-line and go Vega Ione from Penn State. I think this is tremendous value at 23 for him. I don't think he falls this far in the draft, but if he does, I think the Eagles have built a culture around winning in the trenches, especially with their offensive line, and they've shown a great ability to be able to do it, and Landon Dickerson really did not look good last year. So I think they're just looking to get younger there, more talented there, and develop some players there that can kind of help push them back into Super Bowl contention again. So not a bad pick for them. Let's spin it again. Big money, big money, big money. A lot of non-Power 5 schools. There's just not a lot of non-Power 5 talent at the top of this draft. So we're at the Cleveland Browns, and What are our options looking like? This is a non-Power 5 program. Missouri, A&M, Alabama. There's just the edge rusher. Is there any... Oh, man. Is there any linebackers that make sense? No. Corners? No. Edge rusher is just not really a position of need for them. I mean, you can make the argument playing alongside Myles Garrett will just kind of help him. Is there interior? No. Safety? No. How about offensive line? Is there a center? Kansas State, A&M, Oregon, Georgia Tech? No. Yikes. There's going to be a reach that we see right here. Is there a wide receiver? Wow. Okay, so here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to have them go edge, and I'm going to have them, where is he here? I just saw him. They're going to take Malachi Lawrence out of UCF. That's going to be their pick. Not a lot of options, but you can never have enough edge rushers, and he's going to be another guy that can slot in on the opposite of Myles Garrett. And that's the pick, and that's all I can say to defend it. But the wheel gets what the wheel gets. That's how we're doing the video today. And we keep it moving along, and now we've got our first trade, and it's a picks-only trade, so no players are involved in this one. So now we're going to head over here, and the Bears are going to be trading. So I think what you look at is who would be looking to trade up and who would be the players that teams would want to trade up to get based off how the board is falling right now. And I think there's one specific guy in mind that a team would want to trade up to go and get. And I think it's Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end out of Oregon, who's really plummeting in this draft. And when you look at the Bears and their positions, they have Colston Loveland, who they just took last year, who was phenomenal. And then they have Cole Kmet behind him, taking another tight end, if that's like the premier top guy right now available on the board. I think that makes perfect sense where the Bears would trade down and still be able to come away in this draft with whoever it is that they wanted. So who would want to come up to grab Kenyon Sadiq in the first round here? And I'm looking at some of the teams right here, and I'm going to do something that's a little bit weird, but I think it makes a lot of sense. So we're going to go ahead and propose a trade, and it's going to be the Chicago Bears and the San Francisco 49ers. So if anyone went and saw my mock draft that I did, I actually had San Francisco, and we'll have them kick in like a third to kind of sweeten the pot here, sweeten the deal. They rejected it. All right, we're going to repropose this. Okay, let's go to San Francisco, Chicago. I'm just going to do what I can to kind of push it through, but it would look something like that. Okay, so they're likely to accept. Okay, so San Francisco now is picking at 25, but in my mock draft, I had the San Francisco 49ers taking Eli Stowers in the first round at 27. That was like my one big reach in my mock draft, and the reason is these tight ends are way more versatile than just being an inline tight end. And with George Kittle, one, being on the wrong side of 30, and two, suffering a very serious injury late last season that's going to have him missing time, I don't think that Jake Tonjes is going to be your guy full-time as a tight end. And I think Kyle Shanahan likes to run a lot of 12 and 13 personnel, which emphasize 2, sometimes 3 tight ends on the field. Kenyon Sadiq, not only can you run as a designated inline tight end, but you can run him as a big slot, and he has the athleticism to be a mismatch nightmare against slot cornerbacks because he's bigger and more physical than them and can maul them in the run game. And he's way too fast and quick for linebackers. And I think Kyle Shanahan can really utilize that type of skill set in a variety of different roles. So while obviously you think they want a wide receiver, they're kind of getting this and more with Kenyon Sadiq. So I really like that pick at 25, and I can see a world where they just jump a couple of picks just to make sure that they go and get him right there. Which brings us to number 26, the Buffalo Bills. Let's see what they end up doing, and they're going to do a random player. So this is the most random thing that I've got, and I just did a test drive right here. I went to ChatGPT and I said, name a random player from the 2026 NFL Draft, and it said Harold Perkins, who is not even close to sniffing the first round. So we're going to have them do it again. Name a random player from the 2026 NFL Draft. Quinn Ewers is not in the 2026 NFL Draft. Will Campbell is not in the 2026 Draft. Drew Aller is the pick. Wow. So this is probably the worst pick in the entire mock draft. So with the 26th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Buffalo Bills are going to be selecting Drew Aller, the quarterback out of Penn State. That is a horrible pick and makes absolutely no sense. But the wheel gets what the wheel gets. Let's hope that the wheel doesn't get too crazy with some of these final ones. So now with the 27th pick, they're going to be going to the defensive line, which I think makes perfect sense for the Chicago Bears. And I think there's a lot of really interesting options. And given that the interior D-line is kind of picked away at this point, I think coming out of this with Keldrick Falk at the 27 is tremendous value. And he's, in terms of his measurables, a freak. 6'6", 285. I think he projects to be very similar in build to like a Montez Sweat, someone who's really flourished over in Chicago. And I think they'll really be able to maximize that skill set over there. Good pick. And we get to the Houston Texans, who need a lot of different things to help out C.J. Stroud and continue being a perennial playoff team. And they're going to go and get a player that's shorter than 6'1". And I think there's a lot of great options that they can go with here. But unfortunately, not many of those options align with what they need. Of course, I think the biggest need that they have is something on the offensive line, which none of them are going to be under 6'1". Then you look at linebacker and tight end, which it says right here. Neither of those are going to be under 6'1". So I'm going to have them take a guy who's really been falling in this draft and just kind of makes a position that they have that much better. I'm going to have them take Avion Terrell. And I believe he is 5'11", 180 pounds out of Clemson. This is tremendous value for him right here. I think he goes higher than this in the draft, obviously. And, yeah, I know they have Derek Stingley Jr. over there. And then, over the top, they have Jalen Petrie, who's been amazing. And I think it makes their defense that much better. Just obviously, there's positions that they need way more that are available here. And now we're at 29, I believe, with the Kansas City Chiefs. And we're going to go back to normal here. And they're going to take a consensus pick. So at this situation, Kansas City went Mansour Delane, so they went defensive back out of LSU with their previous pick. So now here, I think the consensus, what they would do, is probably offensive line. Mahomes obviously is coming back from an ACL, and the past couple of years, building out a really strong offensive line has certainly been a challenge for them. So I think in this situation, it would probably be, I'm gonna say Caden Proctor. I think Kansas City has needs all over the offensive line, and while Caden Proctor doesn't really have, the best arm length and hand size to translate into being a tackle, I think he can translate over to slotting into guard pretty well. And given his experience at a blue chip program in Alabama at tackle, if needed due to injury or whatever's going on, I think you can certainly still have the versatility to move him over to tackle. And I think Kansas City will find a way to make him valuable and make him work over there, which is a great pick for them. And now we're at Miami. I think they went with Jermod McCoy with their 11th pick. And now they're going to be going with another speedster. They're going to take someone who had a faster than a 4.45 40-yard dash time. And let's take a look at testing. Dylan Thieneman ran a 4.35. Dylan Thieneman ran a 4.35. What about other positions here? 4.44. Do they want to double up on corners and double up on Tennessee Volunteers? Could be an option. How about some of these wide receivers? Do they want to go and get a wide receiver? Denzel Boston obviously didn't test. Oh, neither did Concepcion, so we can't go there. How did Omar Cooper Jr. do? Did he test? 4.42. I think that's going to be the pick. I think the biggest position of need for the Miami Dolphins is absolutely their wide receivers, and they addressed their secondary with their 11th pick, taking Jermod McCoy. So I think they need to go get some weapons for Malik Willis, who they just signed in free agency. And I think they're going to take Omar Cooper Jr., who is going to be taking away a player that I bet New England would be really ecstatic to take at 31, a divisional opponent. So I think that makes a lot of sense there, and I think that's an amazing pick and an amazing fit for Omar Cooper Jr. Let's spin it and see what the New England Patriots, the Super Bowl runner-ups, are going to be doing. And they're going to be making a slightly bad pick. They're going to be making a slightly bad pick. So I think anyone not taking Dylan Thieneman at this point is making a slightly bad decision. So for them, I think wide receiver would probably be the biggest position of need. Edge rusher, certainly. There's a lot of options here. So what I'm going to have them do, let's look at the wide receivers. I think what I'm going to have them do is they're going to reach on a wide receiver, and that's going to be their pick. Actually, you know what? No. I think this is a good pick in my opinion, but I think some people may say this is a slightly bad pick. I'm going to say they take Eli Stowers, the tight end out of Vanderbilt. Now, me personally, I'm very high on Eli Stowers, and I think you can play him in a lot of different roles. And I think what you saw with his testing was this guy was unbelievably athletic. 4'5", 45 vertical, 99th percentile, 96th percentile testing, one of the highest raw athletic scores out of the scouting combine ever. So I think he has the athleticism and skill set to play as a big slot, as an inline tight end, and Hunter Henry's not getting any younger. I think you could certainly view this as getting another receiver to help out Drake May. However, with the fact that Thieneman's here, there's more offensive linemen here, there's a lot of other wide receivers that are viewed as first-round talents that are here, Denzel Boston, Casey Concepcion. I could see where some people would be, why are we taking another tight end? So I'm going to say it's a slightly bad pick, but I don't think it's egregious. And now we're at the last and final pick in this crazy draft that's gone on here. And we're going to have the Seattle Seahawks keeping it pretty normal to wrap things up and going offensive line. And I think this is, without a doubt, going to be Caleb Lomu, the offensive tackle out of Utah. And with that being said, this is our Wheel of Chaos, everyone. The wheel has spoken, and this is our draft. So I think there's a lot of things that make sense here, but there's also a lot of craziness. I don't know what Buffalo is thinking in their right minds here, but that's what the wheel has asked for, so they get Drew Aller. Let me know what you think of the Wheel of Chaos. Let me know what you think of this concept, and if you like the video, leave a like, comment, subscribe down below, and I'll catch you in the next one. See you later, everyone.